Good evening and welcome to the news, but first, our top stories. We begin with news breaking that police forensic experts exhume bodies believed to be the remains of 3 members of the December 30th armed attack on State House. President Barrow outlines more development programs for the citizenry during meetings in the West Coast region. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair arrives in Banjul for a day's walking visit. UNDP Chief Helen Clark commends Gambia for the steps taken in promoting the welfare of women and girls. And Jacob Zuma faces a huge backlash from his own party members after his sacking of Popular Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Well, viewers, those are your headlines. Thanks for joining us. We begin this newscast with a news flash on the search for the bodies of the victims of the 22-year rule of former President Yahya Jammeh. Forensics expert from the Gambia Police Force today exhumed 3 bodies at an unmarked grave at the Tintimba firing range in Buyam. The bodies are believed to be that of Colonel Lamin Sane, Captain Njaga Jain, and Alhaji Jaja Nyas, who were part of the group that attacked the State House on December 30th, 2014. We hope to bring you more on that story in our 10 p.m. news bulletin. His Excellency Adama Barrow took a break from his 10-day tour of the country, where he met with the masses and outlined priority areas of his government. Mamadou Jallo reports on the President's engagement in the West Coast region.
After a week in the provinces, the President, His Excellency Adama Barrow, continued his Meet the People's tour in the West Coast region. On Thursday, President Barrow held meetings in Pirang, Brikama and Gunjur, where he thanked the people of the West Coast region for the outstanding show of support during the last presidential election, which gave him an overwhelming victory over his 2 rivals. With the presidential election now behind us, President Barrow called for unity amongst the different political forces to effect the much-needed change which has become the mantra of his administration. We fought and sacrificed our lives to win the last presidential elections to remove Yahya Jammeh. That was the only solution that could have saved the Gambia and bring peace to our beloved country. President Barrow called for a break with the past, saying valuable lessons have been learned which could help save the future of this country. He promised to revitalize the fishing industry in Pirang, which according to the villagers is currently at its lowest. Speaking about the state of the Gambia's healthcare system, President Barrow revealed that his government has engaged the Chinese government to provide doctors for the country's hospitals decades after they left. This, the President argued, with immensely improved services in the health facilities where a shortage of trained personnel is a challenge. The tour continues Saturday with planned meetings in Lamin, Sincho Alaji and Sukuta. Mamadou Jallo, GRTS News.
The Regional Director of Amnesty International West Africa Regional Office, Aliou Tine, Friday morning paid a courtesy call on His Excellency the President Adama Barrow at his office. Mr. Tine, who is at the head of the delegation, is in the Gambia to commend government for the steps it is taking to end impunity. After their meeting with President Barrow, Mr. Tine spoke to waiting journalists.
All the very strong decision taken to release the prisoners, to reverse the withdrawal of the CICC, and also to applaud the fact that you have TRC. And we have worked for a long time, for a decade, monitoring, denouncing human rights. And we have appreciated the political will to have a new chapter of the history of Gambia with a priority relating to human rights, protection of human rights. Is why we have wrote a letter to the President of the Republic based on consultation of Gambian human rights civil society and with representatives of governments with a series of recommendations relating to guarantee the freedom of expression. It is very important because many people in Gambia have been in jail or were tortured because of their freedom of expression. Well,
former British Minister Tony Blair is in the Gambia for a day's working visit. The leading statesman is expected to meet government officials among a host of other engagements. Shortly after his arrival, Mr. Blair spoke to waiting reporters.
Great moment to come to the Gambia because of the change that's happened here politically. You've got a new president, there's a new start for the country. What my work in Africa is about supporting governments, particularly new governments as they come into power. How do they do the difficult business of governing? Because campaigning is one thing, governing is another. And so we support presidents throughout the continent. And I'm going to come and have a discussion with the president today and see how we can help him. So this is all through my foundation. And so I have an initiative, the Africa Governance Initiative, that works with governments throughout Africa to help them promote change. So now is the moment.
Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair there, speaking to reporters shortly after his arrival in the country. Whatever UNDP can do leading the development system to mobilize support for this very important transition, we will do, says UNDP Chief Helen Clark as he jets out of Banjul on Thursday evening at the end of a day-long visit to the Gambia. The UNDP head also hailed the protection of women and girls' rights through the enactment of the End Child Marriage Act and the ban on FGM Act as crucial gains in the empowerment of Gambian women and girls. As we hear this report by Teneng Jite, Helen Clark also had a closed-door meeting with President Barrow shortly before departure.
Through truth and reconciliation is an integral part of our development process as the nation transitions to a democratic political system. This is also apparent as the country prepares to choose new National Assembly members. Helen Clark, the UNDP administrator on her day-long visit in the country, emphasized the need for political dialogue that works for the Gambia.
I think that with many parties running, there's likely, of course, to be a multi-party parliament, so there's going to need to be a lot of political dialogue. That's an important step. I think in time, Gambia will work out a way of how it comes to terms with the past, and there are some very difficult things to deal with: the disappearances, the deaths in custody, the tensions, the maltreatment of people who stood up to protest, including the shocking things that happened last year.
The UNDP chief was speaking to press after a day-long meeting with President Barrow. She also disclosed that the Gambia's decision to return to the ICC and the Commonwealth is a very positive move for the country and the international community as a whole.
I also think it's very welcoming that the Gambia is back fully as a participating member of ECOWAS, because it was missing in action in ECOWAS for a number of years. I have met with 4 of the senior ECOWAS presidents in Abidjan earlier in the week. They all are so thrilled to see this transition in the Gambia and the Gambia coming back fully into the regional family.
Madam Clark spoke of the need to support Gambian women as key contributors to the country's economy, who make up about 70% of the workforce in agriculture and small-medium enterprises.
Well, Gambian women need the same opportunities as everyone else. They also need ways to be able to develop their micro-business, whether it's in agriculture or any other area. We have been doing a lot on gender empowerment to the extent that we can. I think that the legislation that was passed last year against FGM and against child marriage. It's very important that this is now actively sensitised within communities so that the message goes out strongly that the girl child deserves to be able to finish school, have choice over their life, and be supported to be able to prosper in the society like anyone else.
It could be recalled that legislations on female genital mutilation or cutting and child marriage both came into effect in 2016, despite the celebrations by activists who fought so hard and commendations from women's rights movements and girls' empowerment groups. The enforcement mechanism for both laws are yet to be explored. Madam Clark, after an intensive day meeting with stakeholders and government functionaries, departed to Gambia for her next destination. I am Tenenjite reporting for GRTS News.
The Minister of Women's Affairs, Aja Fatoumata Jallow Tambajang, has held talks with the Executive Director of UNFPA, Dr. Babatunde Osoti Mehin, and the UN Under-Secretary for Political Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Feltman, on the sidelines of the Commission on the Status of Women Summit in New York. Edna Musubaji covered the event and she filed in this report.
The Minister of Women and Gender Issues, overseeing the Office of the Vice President, Madam Fatoumata Jallow Tambajang, and her entourage, whilst in New York attending the Commission on the Status of Women meeting, paid a courtesy call on the Executive Director of UNFPA, Dr. Babatunde Osoti Mehin, and the UN Secretary General, Political Affairs, Mr. Jeffrey Feltman, to discuss bilateral relations. Speaking to GRTS shortly after the courtesy call, Madam Fatoumata Jallow Tambajang described the meeting as a fruitful one.
We were very honored that he accepted the request. He honored all the requests that we made to him through his office, that is the upgrading of the UNFPA office to a country representational level. We also asked for additional support to address issues of human rights of women like FGM, capacity building, advocacy, education, and providing opportunities for the traditional practitioners who do the female circumcision. We were also provided the opportunity to ask for requests for assistance for the youths. That also they agreed, and that is within the context of filling the gap for the gender divide among the youths.
She added that the discussions centered on women economic empowerment and the youth. For her part, the Minister of Trade, Regional Integration and Employment, Dr. Aissatou Touré, said for the economic empowerment of women to be efficient, women need to invest in upgrading themselves.
Increasing the capacity of women and girls, training them on micro-enterprises, MSMEs, and also creating education, making sure that girls are retained in school, not only within the primary level, but right across the whole spectrum up to university, is something that we must, if we are really wanting to say that we want women to be economically empowered. Because if you want to attract the high-level jobs, you want to be engaged in the technologies and so on, it requires education. So education is key to almost everything. In governance too, you expect to have people who can actually communicate, who can actually understand policies and get to apply this within the framework of governance.
For GRTS News, Edna Musu reporting.
It's the purposeful launch of the first National Development Blueprint by the coalition government as the new Gambia prepares to embrace inclusive growth and sustainable improvements, invigorating the advancement of all sectors. That's the ambitious impetus shaping the new medium-term National Development Program. But as Ibrahima Jatta reports, officials engaged in the review meeting are moving hands-on towards ensuring efficiency in all aspects to accelerate meaningful national progress and prosperity.
Your input and role as permanent secretaries in the formulation and effective implementation of NDP cannot be overemphasized, as you are the chief technicians of the sectors. This plan will build on the gains registered during the page implementation and address the challenges encountered with a view to achieving the development objective of the current regime for a better Gambia.
It began with enormous enthusiasm, an all-encompassing development forum paving the way towards the implementation of a workable blueprint, drawing and engaging the move to accomplish sustainable and inclusive progress in all government sectors.
Indeed, given the intricacies and complexities of sustainable nation building, it is important to ensure that the strategic planning processes and management is not abdicated to one person or one institution.
An outgrowth of previous development blueprints, the medium-term National Development Plan invigorates a well-situated effort to implement government programs with strategic partners. The draft document galvanizes support and expertise via a public-private sector-led framework incorporating a vast development strategy looking to maximize growth.
UNDP also provided an international consultant, 3 local cluster consultants, and financial and technical support to all the consultative workshops and meetings held. The process was stalled during the political impasse, and we're happy to witness this meeting to rekindle the process and dialogue.
The 161-page draft document places significant emphasis on human capacity improvement with a comprehensive focus towards motivating efficiency in government sectors to accomplish the distinct and collective aspirations of the populace.
Once this document passes through these processes, the validation and eventual approval by Cabinet, it will become the reference point for all our engagements with our multilateral and bilateral development partners.
And so work begins to inculcate the needs of the new Gambia and programs of the coalition government into the medium-term national development outline. Its fundamental constituents are designed to drive a solid macroeconomic management framework, strengthen the public sector, and promote sustainable inclusive growth, embodying every sector of development. Ibrahim Ajata, GRTS.
Gambian activists who once lived in exile during the 22 years of Jammeh's rule are recounting their experiences. The forum was organized by prominent activist Usainu Menga, who spent years in exile in the United States. Tamara Kanyi was at the event and he now reports.
He killed my dad and my aunt. He will leave nobody.
I have to leave my kids behind and go to Senegal for 1.5 months, and I couldn't sleep at night, leaving my kids behind. I was actually running for my life.
I'm a victim of losing my grandson. You all know Ibulo. Ibulo is my grandson.
One by one, victims narrated their sad stories, demanding the new government to help them achieve justice. Usainu Mbenga, a human rights activist who had been on self-exile in the United States, is the head of the group. Many of the victims had lived with these sad stories for the past 2 decades of former President Yahya Jammeh's rule. They described the regime as tyrannical.
My uncle Njaga Jang. Njaga Jang was living a comfortable life in America, but he came over here to fight for justice. I can still remember that night when we were told that my uncle actually came, and we were so anguished, we were feeling anguish that day. And the early morning when my mother called and said my uncle was actually killed.
I was just sitting at home one day. My dad just called me on the phone and told me that the NIA came to pick me up.
And I was taken to a place, unknown place, where I see different men, more than 20. Modu Fati, Alaji Fati, we are 27 in number. Some of them cannot even work for more than a week. I, Fat and Fat Kamara, we were at coma for 3 days. Solo passed away at that very night.
The 22 years of President Yahya Jammeh's rule is globally accused by many human rights agencies to be one of the most dictatorial in Africa, with serious records of human rights abuses. The regime is accused of unlawful arrest and detention, as well torture of prison inmates.
This is the moment for the judiciary to show us the mettle we are in. Just as the Gambia People's Electoral Will prevailed on December 1st, 2016, deposing the tyrannical Jammeh regime, so will justice prevail for the victims and survivors of April 10 and 11, 2000.
This group is calling on the new government for investigations. Reporting for GRC's News, I am Famara Kani.
That report by Famara Kani takes us to a forced break. We will be back with news from outside the Gambia. Don't go away.
The National Council for Civic Education hereby reminds the general public that April 6, 2017, the Gambia will hold the National Assembly elections to elect representatives who will serve them for the next 5 years. The conduct of National Assembly elections is a constitutional requirement and voting a civic duty as enshrined in Section 26 and 39 of the Constitution. The legislature is the second most important arm of government, as it is responsible for enacting laws, reviewing policies and agreements, as well as exercise continuous scrutiny and supervision of the government on behalf of the people. Thus, it is important that all eligible citizens go out and vote for their candidate of choice. The Gambia has a secret ballot system. Your vote is secret and will not be known by anyone, and each vote can make a difference. As candidates campaign for your votes, Gambians are reminded again to stay away from violence during the period to ensure that peace and stability prevails. Avoid the use of abusive language, provocative actions, intimidation, threats and physical confrontation at all times, as these contravenes the laws of the Gambia. Your vote, your choice, vote wisely.
Welcome back. South African President Jacob Zuma is under mounting pressure over his sacking of popular Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Even President Zuma's own deputy has criticized the move as totally unacceptable. The sacking was part of a cabinet reshuffle seen as an attempt to assert control over Zuma's divided African National Congress. We have details in this report.
Dismissal of his finance minister, Jacob Zuma is trying to put a positive spin on a cabinet reshuffle that's threatening to plunge his party into chaos.
I've decided to make changes to the national executive in order to improve efficiency and effectiveness.
Pravin Gordhan's sacking is part of a broader cabinet shakeup that will replace 10 of the country's 35 ministers. The sweeping overhaul has triggered a crisis for South Africa's ruling ANC, the party that has governed since the end of apartheid. Gordhan was widely respected as finance minister. Pledging to fight corruption, he enjoyed support among many in the ANC, as well as ordinary South Africans. On Friday, his supporters gathered outside the National Treasury building to protest. Gordhan was defiant after his dismissal. He said he and his deputy had nothing to hide.
This is the so-called intelligence report which said that, amongst others, the two of us and the Director General are involved in this massive conspiracy to undermine the economy of this country. And if you read this, this is absolute nonsense.
That sentiment was echoed by the president's own deputy, Cyril Ramaphosa, who launched an unprecedented verbal attack on Zuma.
My strong objection to the removal of the Minister of Finance and his deputy is being based on spurious allegations, and that is the basis of my objection. And I told the President so, that I would not agree with him on his reasoning to remove the Minister of Finance. And I told him that this I would articulate publicly.
Gordon is being replaced by Malusi Gigaba, a former Home Affairs Minister with no experience of managing the economy. Observers say the shakeup will further undermine Zuma's ability to govern. The president has faced a series of corruption allegations and other scandals during his presidency. But so far, he's survived all attempts to oust him from office.
How can big data influence elections campaign? We have all heard about fake news, of course, social media and hacking in the US presidential election, but manipulating big. The billions of pieces of information that we all leave behind us when we use the internet can also produce valuable dividends for political parties. A conference in Berlin has been exploring why.
I've got an alternative fact for you. Martin Schulz uses Germany's spy agency to listen to Angela Merkel. Gadgets that disperse fake news around the world, always a concern in Germany, but especially before federal elections. In Berlin, internet experts and political strategists are meeting to talk not just about the risks of big data, but the opportunities it brings. Every click, every internet search leaves behind a trail. Every bit of information reveals the preferences and attitudes of users or potential voters. That kind of information is vital when deciding where to invest campaign resources.
For candidates and election campaigns, there's always two scarce resources, which is time and money. And digitalization, social media, data in particular, has the tremendous effect that we can make things more efficient and more effective. So you get more bang for your buck in the end.
Big data played a big role in the last two US elections. With half a year to go until Germans head to the polls, political parties here are increasingly turning to new technologies.
We're still on a much smaller scale. The level of efficiency is not there yet, based on data structure as well. But I think it's ramping up, and you see that some momentum is shifting, especially on some of the candidates, like the Social Democratic candidate Martin Schulz, who's communicating extremely effectively via social media.
Thanks to big data, various types of voters can be much better targeted, but some things just never change.
You've got to focus on making sure that you have a message and a narrative that resonates with people. And if you can't get that done, all the data in the world is not going to help you achieve anything on election day.
So perhaps the big new world of big data isn't so revolutionary after all.
We take our second break now. Stay with us.
QCell's Data Fiesta just got bigger and better. QCell Data Fiesta has now added WhatsApp and Viber. Incredible! Yes, it's the big...
Welcome back, and before we take leave of you, a recap of today's main stories. Police forensic experts have exhumed bodies believed to be the remains of 3 members of the December 30th armed attack on State House. President Barrow has outlined more development programs for the citizenry during meetings in the West Coast region. Former British Prime Minister Tony Blair has arrived in Banjul. UNDP Chief Helen Clark has commended Gambia for the steps taken in promoting the welfare of women and girls. Jacob Zuma is facing a huge backlash from his own party members after his sacking of Popular Finance Minister Pravin Gordhan. Well, viewers, that was all in this edition of the News at 8. Join us at 10 for another bulletin. Until then, stay with GRTS.